2, 1, let's go.
And here we are at Attmans Deli in Potomac with There's the man Danny Mata with Don Marcus from the Sun Papers, and of course my DC sidekick Wayne Viner. Let's start off today, Don, with another heartbreaking loss yesterday. Is that a good word to use?
Well, it was heartbreaking at the end. For the first 30 minutes, it was mind-boggling.
And what is the reason for these kind of like horrendous starts we're getting off to? Now, there's been a lot of talk. We both asked Turgeon about Shaq starting instead of Mitchell. Maybe there'd be some more energy, some more offense. But what's your take on the bad starts?
You know, I think that it's a combination of not having a experienced point guard to get you into a flow of a game. I think it's a little immaturity on the part of a number of players, some of whom shouldn't be immature at this point, who are juniors. And I think Maryland. I think some of it is that there was so much local hype, not national hype, local hype about how this was going to be a breakthrough year for Maryland, that I think the kids started thinking, okay, we just have to show up and we're going to beat these teams. And if Oregon State was not an eye-opener for the first half against Abilene Christian, and what happened yesterday at Verizon Center, by now they should know there are players. There are a lot of players out there, and they're better than Maryland right now. A lot of teams better than Maryland right now.
All right, we're concerned, or I'm concerned, and I'm sure you are as well, that these not out-of-conference losses is putting Maryland up against the wall inside the conference. You have a loss. You have 4 out-of-conference losses now. You don't really have a signature win. Providence could turn into one. We're going to hope. But you're looking at 11-7, or else, don't you agree that they're going to have to do well in the ACC to move on?
Yeah, I don't think that, I think the days of having a set number of wins is I don't think Maryland has to win 20 games. But if they win 18 or 19, it better be the right 18 or 19 games. And they also have had, as you pointed out, and we've talked about, they've also had some bad losses. Now, Oregon State, if they turn out to be a good team in the Pac-12, that may not be as bad a loss. But if they don't, that's a bad loss. Yesterday, GW, if they turn out to be a good team again, it's not considered. So we really don't know what the bad losses are right now.
But there are no good wins except for Providence and maybe Northern Iowa.
Well, again, we don't know what the good wins are, so we don't really know. But so it's going to come down to the ACC. And it's going to come down, and listen, believe me, Maryland is not going to be cut any favors based on the schedule they've been given. In terms of the ACC, I've already made the statement that they're going to be a road team at home in the ACC this year in terms of the way calls are made. I just think the ACC wants to make it as tough on Maryland as they can for last year.
Now, see, I agree with that in a way, but there's no conspiracy. I don't believe that.
Well, the ACC has always...
But it's in the refs' minds.
Well, here's the thing.
It's in their minds, Wayne.
The ACC, to me, has always... And I don't follow it as closely as I did when I covered not only Maryland, but when the Sun used to send me to cover ACC games. The ACC has always been a front-runners league in terms of the way the games have been officiated. If you were one of the front-runners, you got called. If you were not, you didn't get calls. I remember years ago Maryland playing Howard on a Tuesday night and going in the line 40-something times. 3 days later, this is when they weren't that good, Maryland. 3 days later, they went and played North Carolina and North Carolina went to the line 40-something times. Same set of, not the same refs, but they were ACC refs. So to me, that sort of said, okay, this is how this league is officiated. I haven't seen a change over the years. Turgeon, for whatever reason, he is one of the nicest people. We've all said that. For some reason, officials either think, okay, he's too nice and I can make calls. Yesterday, there was some, I agreed with him. the call that he got the technical on was a horrendous
Well, the
call.
Mitchell call at the end of the game was bad.
Well, it was at the other end of the court. You know, it looked like he
It's
got
never
hacked.
called. It's
You know,
never
I saw Evan Smotrich get undercut right in front of me, and the ball was called out of bounds off Maryland. So I just think, for whatever reason, he doesn't get a lot of calls, and you know, maybe it's, you know, that he's only been in, you know, in this league for 3 years, in this area for 3 years. Gary was here. I have no idea, but that's not saying that's why Maryland lost. Maryland lost because they didn't show up for the first 30 minutes of the game.
Well, let's talk about, I would say, what's missing on this team. What I don't see is the big tough guy. Mitchell's sort of that role, but we just don't have that big banger down there, and we still don't have the guards worked out.
Right. They have a decided lack of toughness, attitude. I'm going to talk to Juan in a couple of weeks to do a story on Juan. I don't know if he'll be honest with me. He must be going crazy watching this team close up, because this is as, you know, Juan Dixon was the ultimate, you know, just a very hard-nosed competitor, as were some of the other guys on that championship team, Luton and Blake and Baxter, and you go right down the list. You have a hard time going past Charles Mitchell and Varun Ram to find a guy who plays with any kind of, you know, grit. Maybe Jonathan Graham yesterday was the first time I've seen that.
Two things. Jonathan Graham put some energy in his team yesterday, and the full court press. To me, they won last year when they went to the press. They did better this year against UConn when they pressed, and last night against GW, because I see the creation of like a chaotic helter-skelter kind of game, and that plays into Maryland's hands.
Well, it plays in Maryland's hands because they can't play consistently well in a half-court offense. And so that play, when the game gets when they speed the game up, because Maryland does play well at times in a fast-paced game, when they speed the game up, and they can cause that. I don't disagree with you. Maybe they should try that against BC. The problem with playing the press, and we've talked about this before, is you don't have a shot blocker, or the way the rotation is constituted right now, you don't have a shot blocker at the back of the press to block shots, to take charges. Maybe that's Jonathan Graham. Maybe it's DeMonte Dodd. I don't think, as it stands right now, I don't think it's Shaquille Clear.
Now, you told me that, I don't know when it's coming out in the Sun paper, but you wrote an article about maybe it's time to give Roddy Peters the reins.
It hasn't. It's going to be a blog that'll be appearing tomorrow.
Okay, which is yesterday. But go ahead.
Okay.
Tell us the emphasis of it.
I mean, here's the thing. I looked around the country at freshman point guards, and I zeroed in on two other guys. I'm sure there are plenty of other guys. Two guys that I'm aware of. One guy is Tyler Ennis at Syracuse. He is from another planet. Okay, the guy has 44 assists and 9 turnovers this year, averaging like 13 points a game on a team that will get a lot of votes as the number 1 team in the country. And he was I think the 5th rated point guard coming out of high school last year. He wasn't the 1st, he was the 5th. Okay. Then you look at a guy at Michigan, who John Beilein has thrown. He jumped him ahead of Spike Albrecht, who had that great game in the Final Four, because he knows this kid, Derek Walton Jr., is going to be his point guard. His stats are very comparable. He's playing 30 minutes a game. His stats are very comparable to Roddy's. Assist to turnover ratio is like 1.5 to 1.
Yeah, but isn't part of the problem with Roddy, again, we're Attmans delicatessen here on 79-13 Tuckerman Lane. Isn't part of Roddy's problem, though, the defensive end of it? They feel he gets a little lost out there?
It's the defensive end in what is... He's not... here's the thing. He's not the only one getting lost out there. Okay? There are a lot of guys getting lost in that defense. And there are a lot of guys who... And again, part of it is the fact that they don't have an Alex Len making up for the mistakes that they were making the same mistakes last year, but you had as they call a rim protector behind them. You don't have that this year. So those block shots are becoming layups and dunks.
People underestimated the effect of Alex Len.
Sure. It doesn't.
Defensively,
Yes.
offensively, he was an average player. He had some great moments, but he was a very average player. Defensively, he was a very good player.
Well, you're talking about a rim protector. When Maryland's playing out of the set defense against a set offense, you see guys dribbling in from the three-point line.
Well, that's because,
So not the press. Usually you'd say the press gives up more layups like that.
They're giving them up anyway.
There
Right.
you go.
Right.
So
Now-
what's the difference?
Well, I think the difference is you're starting your pressure. You're starting your pressure in the backcourt.
Right.
If a guy gets by you, you know, again, I don't know. I don't know if pressing all the time, but maybe pressing at the beginning of the game just to try to see if they can get a lead, which is something. If you look on Maryland's games this year, there are very few games that they have come out and taken a 10-point lead. There are plenty of games where they've come out and fallen behind by 10 points.
Right.
Almost everyone.
Well, I mean, except for Morgan State and, you know, Marist, if I remember correctly, I think Marist was a pretty close game for the first half.
The Red Foxes of Marist, I believe.
Before-
And they didn't even tell any jokes, Bruce. They're named Red Fox. They didn't tell one joke. But we have you're at BC this week, and then until January to play another marquee game, and then Georgia Tech comes in the first weekend in January.
You got some tough games coming up. Boston University is better.
I mean, North Carolina Central, didn't they beat NC State?
If they did, we could be in trouble.
You
So
know, somebody beat one of those teams beat NC State or Miami. I think they beat NC State. Or
We
Miami.
can't have any directional team losses. You were saying we can't really take another loss that wasn't.
the
it isn't
losses
Carolina
so
or Duke.
far are bad, but they're not horrendous. Okay, a loss to a bad team would just do us. I mean, because you got Tulsa's not too good.
Right.
Boston
I mean,
University.
Tulsa basically is a favorite to Danny Manning, who's the coach, who's one of his best friends, to get him a pay date, you know, a nice pay date for the program.
Des Wells. Is the Des Wells point guard experiment finished?
I keep thinking it is, but then you know something will happen, and that's one of the things about Mark. He is very indecisive and impulsive at the same time.
Well, I listened to the press conference. You guys were there, and Bruce sent me the audio, and I heard Turgeon talking. He said if the game gets close, Des Wells could be in there at the point.
Right.
And I'm thinking, oh no, but
I understand that. He's really talking about the last second shot, about clearing it out.
I would think that that's what he's talking about, but if it's, you know, if yesterday, here's the thing, yesterday's game is a perfect example of why they don't need Des Wells at the point. They almost came back
Without
him. Okay, there was no Des Wells option in that game. Roddy Peters made he made a couple of mistakes, but he made more good plays than bad plays
we
at the
had
end of that game.
a really nice steal, drives in with sort of a hip-hop crossover layup, and the place starts going crazy. He brings something that we don't
The best point
have.
guard minutes they've had this year, by far, have come from Roddy Peters. The worst point guard minutes they've had this year have come from Des Wells.
Right. Well, the Ohio State game that you had the fortune to be in that.
Fortune?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
Turgeon said to me the other day, I said that Lehman didn't have a lot of good looks in the Ohio State game. And he said, I disagree. You didn't watch the film. And I didn't want to say, I didn't want to watch the film.
Right. No, I mean, Jake has improved dramatically, but he's still a work in progress. I mean, everybody's talking about, NBA scouts are talking about him being a number one pick, maybe even a lottery pick in 2015.
Right.
They've got a long way to go between now and 2015, but he has the most, potentially, he has the best NBA game of anybody on the team by a lot. Right.
You and me talked about it in New York, and I firmly believe that as Jake Lehman goes, Don, it's okay. As Jake Lehman goes, it seems like this team goes.
This video is brought to you by Viner Consulting.
This video is brought to you by Viner Consulting.